Hi, Paul. Thank you for taking time today to chat with me. Maybe we can start with your introduction, please.
With pleasure. Hi, Anil. Thank you for having me there. My name is Paul-Louis Nech. I'm working at Algolia today on recommender models. And it's been quite a journey. I joined Algolia 6 years ago. At that time, Algolia was a 42-person employee, mostly in Paris, with like a handful, 10 people in San Francisco in the US, and that was it. And as I joined, I was a young engineer, just fresh out of school, and I created a developer experience toolkit. So that was already my focus at that time for Android developers, helping mobile devs to create great search interface using Algolia. When I joined in 2016, we had a very powerful API and a few building blocks around it, but these were mostly for the web. Because of that, we could see the pain points for the mobile developers. There was already this tooling called Instant Search JS, which was a set of building blocks for creating web interfaces using the Algolia Search API. And we knew that the same need was there, even bigger actually on mobile, where you had connectivity issues, you had a small screen estate, you had also to follow with all the latest trends in the mobile ecosystem. And because of these, developer tooling was crucial to make a great experience possible on the mobile. And that's where I came at Algolia, and I started from creating developer tooling. I moved quite a bit within the company. First, in the mobile team, we created tools around API clients and UI libraries for the mobile. I started focusing more and more on natural language applications. There was this rise of conversational interfaces, Alexa, voice, chatbots, and this was a place where Algolia wanted to invest. And we knew that developer tooling was even worse in this area. Like if you have played with tools like Dialogflow, with Alexa skills at the beginning, it was quite cumbersome to create and especially to iterate on experiences that you would build with this. And we knew that Algolia, being a developer-based company, we had a chance to provide great tooling here to an ecosystem that needed it more than ever. So I worked on conversational and voice interfaces around 2017, 18, 19, 20, created more and more on these. We started building APIs that were focused on natural language features. It could be APIs to help you speak to your search interface with natural language. And so in general, the question was, is there a way we can help developers by providing the right tools to get the problem out of the way and let them focus on the experience that they want to build? Finally, I joined about a year ago a new team in Algolia, which is working on a new product that is called Algolia Recommend, and that is providing recommender models as a building blocks that anyone can use to recommend alternative products or complementary products or trending content on their websites. Again, helping developers do something complex by giving them building blocks that let them focus on the experience they want to build.
This is great. Paul, I remember when you gave a talk at Talk to Me Berlin about the conversational interface, and you showed the great examples of developer experience and tools. And just before COVID, I think it was a e-commerce expo in Berlin. Just before the COVID in 2020, you also showed us the demo of how quickly you can build a great search experience for e-commerce platform. So yeah, that's great to hear your story on that. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about machine learning and a developer experience on maybe the Algolia Recommend, how you are creating a great developer experience?
With pleasure. This is to me an interesting topic because machine learning is still a very young field. And so we're seeing, there's a lot of things to discover. There's a lot of things to try first and to fail fast in a way. I feel like every time there is a new field, it's a bit the same history of programming that happens again. And so, in mobile, in 2018, everybody wanted a mobile app. And at some point, you would realize that, okay, maybe this use case is not really well served by mobile, but everybody wanted a mobile app. So everybody started building them. And there were tools all over the place, some better than others. Mobile came a long way, and I think today the ecosystem is a lot more stable. We know which tools are for the right job. But no conversational apps went through the same history, if I may say. So in 2018-19, when I was working with Dialogflow, with Alexa, with Google Skills, the same problem happened where there's a new ecosystem everyone wants to be in, but the tooling is very young. And so again, you need to have stupid problems. Deployment is complicated. Continuous integration or testing is complicated. I remember when we wanted to do automated tests of voice skills, there was just no way to do it properly. And now with machine learning, I'm seeing a bit of the same pattern play again, where it's a young field. There's the whole history of AI. It exists since decades, but there was this AI winter, and we're now in a field that's blooming again, thanks to the possibilities of compute, thanks to all of the applications, the computer vision technologies that are there. But the tooling, again, is very young. And so you can see that between the state of the art of the models that exist, of the papers that get published, and what developers can actually build in a given day, there is a big gap. And this gap of expectations is also why key players like Amazon, Netflix, Google are able to have such a head start, because they have all of the power to bring from a research paper to an actual product in production, with monitoring, with deployment across the world, with support for users. And I think this is where APIs have a role to play. When Algolia was founded, building a search API, the goal was to help small companies be able to have the same level of experience as a huge e-commerce platforms. And I think today, the work we're doing with Recommend has the same goal. If you go on Amazon.com and you have a product that is out of stock, they will recommend just the right thing for you. If you go on a video platform like YouTube or Dailymotion and you end the video, they will know what to recommend next that you want. But if you go on a small library's website or a jewel store or some newspaper, providing the same level of content recommendation takes a lot of efforts. And if APIs can provide you the right developer experience to ask the right question and be thinking, okay, let's put all of the technicalities out of the way. What is the experience I'm trying to build? What makes a video the right one to watch next? What makes this clothing item the right thing to recommend if this one is out of stock? I think if APIs can automate all of the technicalities and help developers focus on the right thing they want to build, it's going to unlock many use cases, and it's going to level the playing field for the small people with good ideas to compete against the existing players.
Well, this is great. So in a nutshell, you're trying to bring a great experience like companies like Amazon or YouTube to the smaller startups. They can also provide a similar kind of experience in terms of search suggestions or recommendations with Algolia Recommend.
Yes, this is it.
That's great. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about, I think you pointed out very important points about the deployment problem, the development tooling problem. How did you approach or Algolia approach of identifying these developer problems? Do you do some pair programming with developers, or do you see some patterns, or do you see some data like, hey, this is where the developers are struggling? So do you invest some kind of a research to find out this is a pain to build, or you get some feedback?
So you're asking the right questions here, because ultimately we need to look at how we work to realize wherever there's some friction. You're asking if we at Algolia have a specific approach to it. I don't think there is any kind of structured process that we have around it, but we try to be mindful about where we spend time. I think as developers, it's very easy to get stuck into something, to just go heads down into a problem. And before you notice, the afternoon passed, or the week or the sprint passed, and you spent more time than you would have thought addressing a problem. I feel here, honestly, it's just a matter of reviewing your work, of looking where you spend your own time. I think that in general, if I try to look at where I spend my time, I realize it's not happening like I thought it is. I expect that most of my time is spent developing, but when I actually look at it, there's a lot of, unnecessary stuff that I take more time than I thought doing. It might be just long development loops, where because we're looking at big data sets, it takes maybe an hour or two to train a model and get the results. And because of that, a stupid programming error can waste 2 hours. In these cases, I think the sooner we notice something like this in our day-to-day, the better we can take actions. And it's not rocket science solutions. In this case, having basic unit tests that can assess elementary practices before you train on huge datasets is going to save some time. I feel this is also a place where the solution is not always to work differently, but also to add in the right tooling. There is a blooming field of ML ops tooling that help us find where are issues in our current code, how changing this or that parameter can affect this or that use case. Today, I see in my own work, a lot of what I do is creating small tooling or small helpers that can assess these. And I haven't yet found great tools. I know there are plenty away, I just haven't found the right ones yet. But I think this is in general the direction we should take, is look at how we're working, see where it takes more time than needed, and ask the right questions. Like if it takes half as much time to develop a new feature as to test it on customer use cases, it probably means you don't need to write one new feature before investing in the testing tooling to make it more scalable.
That's great. So you're saying it more like a dog fooding, like before the customer builds using your tool, you play around and your colleagues play around, and they notice that, hey, the developers every day, they spend like a couple of iterations, many iterations. And if we are not providing proper error messages, they're spending a couple of minutes to hours. That's not a great experience. So you try to kind of provide with the proper tooling or unit testing, or way you optimize it. So you kind of improve the developer experience through dogfooding and identifying the friction points where you can eliminate those friction points, making it easy to build apps on top of your tool chain.
Yeah, exactly. And dogfooding here, I think you're pointing on something really crucial that we all tend not to do enough. And that's because we know what's inside the system. So, when I try to use a tool I develop, it's too easy to take a shortcut wherever there is something that has friction. And I just take the shortcut. I'm going to go in debug mode. I'm going to add breakpoints and just grab the data in the middle of the program where I know it has the right shape. But all of these that we can easily do as the creator of the tooling, our users won't, and they won't even try. Like they will just let it go, consider that it doesn't work for the use case, and move fast. There is this saying by Amazon that 100 milliseconds of latency in Amazon.com loses 1% of sales. I find this crazy because it means like half a second of loading time, you lose 5% of your customers. But this is the world we're living in. Like there's some competition. If I'm looking at 3 websites and the first one is slow, I'm going to check the other 2. And I believe here for us, developer toolings builder, it's the same thing. Whenever I try to use a library, let's say for inspecting the memory usage of my tools, if the first one doesn't work in 15 minutes and gives me a good enough starting point, I'm going to try one of the 3 others that my search found up. And I feel here we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the users and make sure that do a user coming to my product in 10 minutes gets something out of it. It might not be the right thing for them. It might be just a correct default to start from, but providing sensible defaults, good getting started guides, and even places to try the tool and test it with. When talking about what makes a great developer experience and what kind of signals we can use to notice if the developer experience of our tools are good or not, one quick way to see is how much it's actually used. I'm thinking, all of these web frameworks like React, where they could have like thousands of downloads, but only a few teams actually using them. And when they started providing predefined building blocks like create React app, if you look at the number of downloads, number of users with correct React app compared to just React, it's crazy. Providing something that by default lets you see how it goes and then adapt to your use case with a proper guidelines makes a whole difference in terms of people using your product, discovering it, and ultimately building something great on top of it.
Well, that's a really good way to put it in a conclusion of React as a library, and also the Create React app, which is more focused on user, like what's the end user wants to get out. It's not a library, but he wants to have. So yeah, this is a great way to look into the usage metrics or the core library itself. That's great. Do you see? I know that Algolia developer experience or developer portal is one of the good developer experience platform compared to Twilio or Stripe. They're all really, really good in terms of developer experience. Do you see, like, how do you make sure the Algolia platform is providing a great developer experience to the developer audience? Do you see, not into your current role, but your previous role where you're more focused on the developer tooling, increasing the developer experience? Did you follow any specific steps to make sure you had a great experience for end users you would like to share with us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the things that makes it so one of the things that allows us to deliver on developer experience is that we're the ones who see when there's a problem. The key for that to me is having a solid support where anyone using Algolia can just reach out when something doesn't work. And this, it's been 6 years I'm at this company. It's been 6 years I'm seeing support tickets of people having a lot of ease doing something and less so doing something else. At first, I would think, and I think as engineers, we often think of support as a necessary evil, like as something, okay, I wanted the customers to be standalone. They need some help. I'm going to give them some help. Fine. But actually, support requests, product feedback for free. Like all of those support requests, they're telling us what people are trying to achieve and where the tooling could be better. This is very precious. Like all of these signals about this or that library that works well for the general use case, but not for this one, are elements that can feed a product roadmap and that can help inform the next decisions. And you ask us specifically at Algolia, I think here we're a bit in between two worlds, because in one hand, we are talking to developers and we want to make sure that the tooling we create are the right one to put in their tool base. And on the other hand, we're also talking to the enterprises, to the businesses that are behind. We want to make sure that Algolia is something that can be used not only by developers, but by product teams overall. And because of that, we need to make sure that we always talk to both audiences, that developers will find their way, but the rest of their team will also be able to deliver. I see one example of toolings that we introduced recently that speaks to this balance between both, which is the Algolia visual merchandising editor. Because as developers, we try to think API first. And that's something I love at Algolia, that all of the tools, all of the things we create, everything can be done via an API. If you talk about the index settings on your Algolia search experience, you can change them in the dashboard in the UI, but you can also set setting in any of our 15 language API clients. Now, this is great, but you can go too far with that and think, okay, let's have everything possible via the API, and any single setting should be a small line of code. The problem with this approach is that for the customers and the businesses, it puts too much of a weight on the developers rather than the rest of the teams. And if you take something like like merchandising, where maybe every week you have a different promotion, a different flash sales, a different something that you want to push. If this is always in the developer's hand, it's going to be a lot of effort for the developer just to update weekly over week the merchandising rules. And because of that, they won't be leveraging all of the new tools, all of the new APIs, the query suggestion, the automatic facet filters, the synonyms generation, all of the new features that we create that really need the developer. Because of that, sometimes developer experience gets better by creating non-developer tooling. And in the case of this merchandiser visual editor, if we allow the merchandisers on the customer team to have a nice UI and every week to review the performance of their search, and based on the analytics to define the new rules, we make some breathing space for the developers to create some advanced UIs that really need some development effort. This is also something where some actors in the machine learning space have really understood. If you look at people like Hugging Face, they are creating a whole ecosystem to allow you to quickly pull a model, test it on a given language, test it on a given use case, and see how it works. If you don't need to adapt it, it's a few lines of code. Heck, you can even just go on the website and there is a text field where you can test the model. So as someone who's not a developer, I could still understand a lot of what's happening there without needing to pull my developer coworker and ask them to spend some time, build a small demo. So this is something where I think it can be often underrated. Developer experience is not just making sure that developers are productive, it's also ensuring that each teammate in a team can do their best and can focus on their area of expertise.
Wow, this is such a great, I love it. Starting from the support, you said support is like a free advice to your product feedback. That's a great perspective. We can get a really invaluable feedback from users who are using our product. If it's a friction in the product, so they're going to get back to the support, and support can be a great way to get input for the product. That's great. I love the perspective from as a support, you're getting a free advice. And also from the enterprise perspective, I also agree with you on in terms of low code or a no code visual editors, it can push us not just on a developer. Not every company or enterprise can hire a developer, but suppose a product manager or a business analyst wanted to play around and understand the tool with visual editor. If they're able to get their job done, why not? Like you said, it's about giving the ability to feel how this tool looks like, taste it, how it feels like, instead of having a barrier like I don't know, I'm not a developer and I need a developer resources to test it out. If we can cut down that barrier and if we can make the path easier for anybody to play around and see the value out of it, that's even greater developer experience, like you said. Totally agree on that. And coming to the machine learning or developer experience, do you see any modern trends you see in terms of developer experience?
Yes, I think this ties to what we've been discussing here, which is that today, machine learning as a theoretical computer science field is already so advanced that if you look at what we can do in theory versus what applications and services are built in practice, the gap is not due to not enough theoretical and great models. The gap is rather due to people not leveraging yet the latest state of the art and the latest research. And I feel like more and more, if we're talking trends in the ecosystem, people are realizing this, that what developers need is not more powerful machine learning models. It's better developer tooling. It's more accessible machine learning components to build on top of it. If you look at some actors like Hugging Face, whose CTO, Julien Chaumont, really understood that developer experience is the main deal breaker. And if you look at their models website, where you can easily pick one, see how they're used, compare with others, it's day and night between this and just reading research papers, thinking, oh, this could be nice, but having no idea how you can actually go from this paper to a proof of concept. With a platform like Hugging Face, you just pick the model, and in a few minutes, you have a lines working and you have some example and you know how it goes. And this honestly, to me, is the biggest trend right now. It's what the chief evangelist from Hugging Face, Julien Simon, talked as the democratization of machine learning. We can see this also from actors like Apple, who've been adding in the iOS development tooling very easy components to create a small image classifier or to create some text intent classifier. All of those tools that can be added in your iPhone applications in a few lines, as a click. There are even some like WYSIWYG drag and drop images classification tool. And I feel like this is going to make it easy for people to build on top of machine learning and to create powerful applications. This to me is also a known pattern. As developers, we tend to focus on just the tech. So if you look at startups that are started by technical founders, they often get into a position where we build a cool product, we don't see users coming, and we don't understand why, because the product is cool, so why don't I have users? And then as founders, we realize that there is a whole world beyond the technology of making sure that the technology is accessible, that it's understandable, that there are clear ways to use it, that people have examples that they can take inspiration from, that there is a support or at least a channel for people to voice feedback, concern, difficulties that you can help with. And here it's the same pattern when we build developer tools. It's too easy to say, I built a tool, why do I have no users? It's by focusing on all of these last mile, last kilometer efforts of making sure from the release tool to the developer tool belt, the remaining steps are addressed, that all of our machine learning tooling, machine learning products are going to become successful platform for a new generation of products. If you look at companies like OpenAI with GPT-3, I think they really cracked this, where they created a very powerful language model. And to me, language models are one of those crazy developer toolings that today we machine learning engineers can use to create very powerful products. But OpenAI knew that it was not just releasing GPT-3, it was releasing it, having a nice beta platform where you can use it, have a playground, see examples. They also have a very dedicated customer success team that engages with the people using it, that delivers API keys, but also gives us some guidance, makes sure that we're using the APIs in the right way. Let us know in advance when an endpoint is getting sunset because a new one can do better the same things. And this is something we see at Algolia when building developer tools, that with the customer scale getting bigger and bigger, they are going to be focused on their own roadmap, and we need to be proactive in letting them know when something new is out, when there is a feature that could simplify their life, when there is a new tool that could be worth reconsidering the way we were building before.
Wow, that's really great, Paul. In terms of stay up to date, do you recommend any blogs, or you listen to some podcasts or social media?
This is a question where I'm not very good at, because I'm always late on what I try to keep up to date. So my main source of things to read and watch is an ever-growing list of tabs that I open when someone shares a link and that I try to close whenever I take some time for it. But there are still a few highlights that I always follow. You're talking podcast. A first podcast I'm following is Get Your AI On. It's the podcast by Ciprian Baldescu on building AI products in general. So it can be from different angles. There is a great episode with Maria Luciana on building responsible AI for good, but it can be talking about building products. It can be talking about monitoring, can be talking about some specific technologies. I think it's great to have these broad perspectives and go in depth in some conversations. Otherwise, I don't follow much podcasts talking about AIs. There are a few websites that I'm not subscribed to, but I go watch here and there. And the first one is Jay Alamar's website. I'm going to share with you the link if you want to add this to our conversation.
Yeah.
He's the author behind a very well-known post called The Illustrated Transformer, where the blog post goes in great details explaining how attention models help and how the transformer architecture is so effective at understanding text. And honestly, like, all of the work he does is super interesting. Like, every blog I find there is a great explanation of machine learning concepts. And I think this is a great example of making complex models that you seem nice, but you would never think you could use, into concrete elements that I can understand and be eager to trying. I feel when we're creating tooling, the thing we should optimize for, the first thing we should optimize for is excitement. Is that when someone first sees our product and our tool, they should be excited and think, okay, I want to try it. How can I get started with it? I want to get a feel of what it allows me to do. Psychologically speaking, a tool is an extension of myself. It's a way to feel that I can achieve more than I could before. And so the more actionable this is, the easier it is for you to just grab the handle and start using it, the more likely your tools are to be useful for someone. And this is also why, to me, developer experience is ultimately user experience. And so reading stuff on what makes or breaks a user experience can be really insightful, even if you need to adapt it to the developer user experience specifically. For that, one website I would really recommend is Build for Mars. I'm going to look up quickly because I'm not sure anymore the name of the author, but is there a UX researcher? Peter Ramsey, that's it. A UX consultant that does case studies on various applications user interface. There's, for example, a very interesting case study on the user interface for the drivers of the Uber Eats application. And this, to me, can transfer very well to building developer tools like we are. Because when you read this case study about Uber drivers who are in the middle of a complicated journey, who have to drive and at the same time to use the app, and where a small problem in the app UX can make a big difference in the driver's day-to-day, I think this is the same pattern when a developer uses our tools, when they have to look at Slack and look at Jira and also make sure that they reply to that email in time. And they're wondering why their code doesn't work the way it should. If in the middle of that, your tooling can be helpful, it's going to save that day. On the other hand, if the tool has just a little quirk that for me as a developer is not a big problem because it's the whole of my focus, for this busy developer who are consuming my tooling, the small hurdle can already be a big blocker on that day. And I feel here reading general things about UX. What is affordance? What is it to have a tool that gets in the way or out of the way? There is a pattern in user experience called do what I mean, where sometimes, so remember on Google, at some point, you could do a typo query, and it would just show you the result of the bad query with a link, did you mean, and a corrected. This was okay, you could click the link, but most people would just see the bad results. At some point, they realized that they could just invert. By default, show the results for the corrected query and mention it and say, did you really mean to search that? And if you click it, you would get the mistyped query results. This is a really good example of do what I mean. The tool understands that you meant maybe something else. So I'm going to go ahead, go out of my way, give you the something else that I think you wanted. And based on that, get some feedback and see if it was the right thing or not. There is one tool in command line interfaces that I've had on all my laptops for maybe 10 years, which is called the fuck. It's a tool you install in your console. And if you mistype a command, or if you do something like a change directory in a directory that doesn't exist, you can type fuck and it will correct the line for you and set you in the right folder. And you can define like all of those recipes so that when you do something and maybe you mean something else, the tool does it for you in a one-line change. I feel like this is what we should be looking at in our developer tools. And reading blogs like Build for Mass can help us realize all of those small frictions in our tooling that are going to make a big difference in our customers' day-to-day.
Wow, that's a great way to end or conclude. Great, Paul. Thank you very much for taking time to have a conversation with me today.